Hi, I've been meaning to post a video on how I make my homemade yogurt because a number of people have asked me to share it. So I started out making this yogurt because I wanted to get away from plastics. I wanted my yogurt to be stored in glass jars to minimize any kind of microplastics transferring into yogurt over time. This has been a goal for me in my household because a lot of new research has come out on microplastics. I used to work in research, so I try to stay tuned. So I started creating my recipe based on YoGourmet. So they have these culture starters, which is basically bacteria in a packet. They have some directions here. I slowly changed their recipe because I wanted a yogurt that was quite thick, like a Greek yogurt. I wanted a mild flavor so that my kids would actually eat it, and they do, with maple syrup and granola. And this is how I created that recipe. So the very first step in making a homemade yogurt is to heat up and essentially decontaminate our milk that we're going to add our bacterial culture to. In my recipe, we're going to be using a whole milk, 3.25%, and some skim milk powder to thicken that up to give a more creamy texture. So our first step, measure out these two ingredients, get them into a pot, and start to heat it up. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm making myself right now a bulk batch. This will make me quite a large volume of yogurt that I store in the fridge for quite a few months. As long as your jars are sterilized, this can last quite a long time. The mixture up to 180 degrees Fahrenheit. This has to be done over medium to low heat with constant stirring. The reason why is because your sugars in your milk, especially at the beginning when you just start stirring, they are going to try and stick to the bottom and burn and ruin your yogurt, which will end up tasting like smoke. The only thing you can do with a smoky yogurt is make popsicles out of it. I added my smoky yogurt 1-to-1 with strawberry compote that I made. So basically cooked strawberries, added some sugar, and then mixed that 1-to-1 with yogurt and froze it into popsicles. It tasted like peanut butter sandwiches, so the kids love that. I don't recommend burning your yogurt, so really, especially the first few times, pay really close attention to really stirring it carefully all the time as you're slowly heating it up and bringing it to 180. You're going to also want to be checking it semi-periodically to see how close you are. The reason we heat is to get rid of any other bacteria or microorganisms that might be living in the milk or the pot or anything that's coming into what is going to be our new yogurt. So we're getting there. I want to show you the skim milk powder that I use. So powdered milk or skim milk powder, it's the same thing, and it's a solid. So you measure it out using measuring cups into your volume of milk that you've put in your pot. And you do that right at the very beginning. So sorry, I missed it. I'm a bit late getting into this video. But that was pretty much the easiest step. You measure that in and you start stirring and slowly bringing this up to temperature. Okay, we're getting there. If ever you notice any sticking in the bottom of your pan, you might want to lower your temperature just slightly, just so that you aren't getting sticking at the bottom of the pan. If you're stirring and it's sticking, that's probably a little bit too hot. Also, I didn't mention before, the YoGourmet starter can be purchased online at Amazon. That's what I did. I grabbed a 16 pack. I've only used 2 of those so far because my yogurt went bad once. I left it a little bit too long. But otherwise, you should be able to keep going with your homemade yogurt as long as you just keep a little bit aside for your next batch. Keep it in a sterilized jar. I have found reusing grocery store jars from jams or anything like that are glass is perfect. Find something that's roughly the size of 1 cup if you want to use it for a large batch like this. And then you just leave it in the fridge completely untouched, unopened until you make your new batch. That's what we're going to do today. Another quick note before we get to panic time. We don't want to hit 100 degrees Celsius. At that point, our milk will be boiling and it will be cooked. And so that will be completely useless for our bacteria to make yogurt. We don't want to cook our milk. We just want to heat it to 180 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, as you can see, just above 80 degrees Celsius, because we want to kill any organisms that might be alive in there so that we're sure that only our bacteria that we add at the next step will be alive. Okay, we're getting pretty close. Fluctuating around 170. Lots of steam coming off. Trick is to really keep things moving. Very close. You might notice it's getting kind of foamy on top. Give it another few whisks. Okay, 180. I was stirring constantly. I'm going to take out the thermometer, turn off my heat. So for the last, I would say 10 degrees, I'm stirring constantly like this to make sure there is absolutely no burning. So if you've made it here, success. This was the hardest part, in my opinion, of making yogurt. Now the next trick is to let this cool all the way back down to 110. So you might want to just leave your thermometer sitting in your pot, and you'll be able to watch the temperature coming down. I recommend pulling your burner off the heat. Slide it over to the side, let it cool. If you want it to cool a bit faster, I have even sometimes put it in the fridge with a lid on to make sure that no contamination can get in there, because otherwise you've done everything for nothing. So I'll do this, put a lid on, and I'm gonna let it cool down to 110. Been waiting a couple hours for this to come down. Process is a lot faster in the winter, and it's pretty cold outside today. There's snow. Before your mixture is at 110 degrees, you want to make sure that your jars are going to be ready and sterilized. So you're going to want to have enough jars for the volume you're going to end up with. And I like to sterilize quick and easy, so I throw my lids into my kettle. I'm going to get those boiling. And then a nice tip for sterilizing your jars, you're going to add about 1 inch of water in each jar, and you're going to throw them in the microwave for at least 3 minutes. You want to make sure that they're boiling. There they are. Bit of water in the bottom. Let's get that going. If it looks like you've gotten to 110 before you're quite ready, you can turn your burner back on and keep it on a very low temperature just to maintain your mixture at 110. At this point, you want to get ready your yogurt starter, a measuring cup to mix a little bit of the warm milk with your starter, a funnel, and a large spoon so that you can scoop the mixture into your jars. You're going to want to make sure that all of these items are sterilized, so washed and then sterilized. I like to use my boiling water after it has finished boiling. Over the sink, I run it over these items. If you have more than 1 jar in the microwave, it might not boil after only 3 minutes. You might need to keep adding minutes and keep an eye on the jars until you see that bubbles are forming. This is good. We can stop here. Carefully use oven mitts and drain the water out of the jars. I've added in one more tool. It's tongs to be able to pull my lids, which are sterilized, out. My yogurt is here. My jars are sterilized. I don't need to worry about keeping them hot. As long as they've been sterilized in the microwave, that's good. We're still around 110 with my milk mixture, and we're pretty much ready to go. The last thing we need is to set up the oven at 110 degrees, which it will stay at that temperature for 4 hours while our culture turns into yogurt. On my oven, I like to use the proof setting to maintain the 110-degree temperature. Let me find it here, proof. There we go, proof, and I want it at 110 degrees. Only the very first time needs to come from a packet like this. Afterwards, you can just use the yogurt that you made as your starter. I seem to always forget something. We need to have a cleaned spatula to get my yogurt out. So clean, sterilized. I'm gonna take my yogurt and add it into my measuring cup. Next, we're gonna add some of our nice warm milk. And we're gonna add this to our yogurt culture. If you want to keep every last drop, if you want, you can throw some in here. Blend that in. I recommend going back to your whisk and really thoroughly whisking your warmed milk into your yogurt. Otherwise, if you end up with clumps in your jars, you might have inconsistent yogurt results. Some might be more acidic, more culture is in them. Some might be less. So really mix it thoroughly. After that's done, you can add this to the entire batch. Again, I recommend using the whisk. And really whisk it thoroughly to make sure it's really well mixed. I've got a clean plate here to keep all my tools on to make sure that they don't get contaminated with anything along the way. I don't want to accidentally end up with a little bit of fungus growing on top of my yogurt. So I take extreme care to make sure everything stays really, really sterile. Comes from my lab background, I can't help it. Once you're pretty confident that this is all nicely mixed, it'll still be a little bit bubbly and frothy. We're gonna add it now to our containers. You want to be careful to make sure that you don't get anything on your rim. If your rim is wet with a little bit of the yogurt or even just water, you could end up with an incomplete seal, and then that could result in, while it's being stored in the fridge, if you have a little bit of mold that's floating around in your fridge, which most people do. We have tiny little mold spores. That's why things can sometimes go moldy in the fridge. Those can work their way in if you don't have a nice complete seal. So you really want to make sure that this is a nice clean and dry edge. If you spill a little bit on it, that's fine. Just grab a paper towel and very carefully clean and dry the edge. All right, I'm going to fill the other jars. Similarly, if you get any drips on the threads, clean those off. I like to use the same jar to put my next starter in. You need to clean it out, so wash it thoroughly. I just use water. I stick it in the microwave for a quick sterilization, and then I add right back into this. I'm going to start adding my lids. You can handle them on the outside. You just don't want to be sticking your fingers on the inside. If there's any residual water in there, you can just kind of flick it out like that. Stick your lid on, and voila. That's ready to go in the oven. I'm gonna put on the other lids. Okay, I got this one out of the microwave. Just a quick note. So it's not perfectly clean, but it's good enough. I haven't had any trouble with this. If you want to give it a really thorough cleaning every once in a while, go ahead. So important to note, it shouldn't be super hot to the touch. This is still really hot. We don't want to kill our active bacteria. That's the whole point of bringing the temperature of the milk mixture down to 110 degrees. So you want to wait until it's warm, not really, really hot. You can run it under some cold water if ever you feel like it's not cooling off fast enough. Usually a couple minutes should be fine. And then add your mixture, and then we're gonna put all these guys in the oven. We're ready to go. Time to pop them into my oven, set to 110 degrees. Once you've put them in the oven, you don't want to be disturbing them until your culture is done. So we're going to put them in, we're going to close the door, and we're going to set our timer. I use 4 hours exactly as my incubation time because when I do longer, although it will give me a more firm yogurt, it'll taste a little bit more sour. Moment of truth. So it's been 4 hours. There we go. Finished. So we'll take all these guys out, put them in the fridge. So it's all in the fridge now. The fridge stops the bacteria from continuing to grow. If the bacteria continues to grow, you're gonna have a thicker yogurt, but you're also gonna have a more sour yogurt. So putting it in the fridge basically stalls the bacteria. It's not gonna kill it, but it's not gonna keep growing. This is why you can leave your yogurt in the fridge as long as it's still closed for quite a long time. Once you open and start using your yogurt, you should consume it technically within about a week. Sometimes you can get away with longer. It depends how clean your fridge and your environment is where you're opening it and using it. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this. Hope it's helpful. And if you have any questions, put them in the comments. Happy to help. Enjoy your yogurt. Bye.